I'm Andrea. I'm an air traffic controller here at Waterloo Airport. And this is a picture of my tower here at the Kitchener-Waterloo Airport in Ontario. And the picture behind me is a picture of the cab where I work. It's not a live picture right now because as I can hear outside, there's a lot of airplanes, a lot of traffic going on. So I would be an interruption to the people upstairs working right now. That's just to give you a view of what my office looks like. As Kaylee said, I've been an air traffic controller here for almost 17 years, and I've always had an interest in aviation. So this, for someone who loves airplanes, this is where to be. I get to see all types of airplanes, and I'll go into more of that later. So some of you may think that an air traffic controller is someone who waves the red or orange wands to an airplane as they're parking their aircraft. That's not really what we do here in the control tower. We do help airplanes navigate and maneuver through the skies by communication. So what does an air traffic controller do? Well, we're responsible for the safe, orderly, and efficient movement of aircraft, and then in that order. So safety is our number one priority, that all airplanes move about safely, and then in an orderly fashion, and finally, efficiently. So they get from where they want to take off to where they want to land quickly as possible. There are two types of air traffic controllers: tower, also known as VFR, and area controller, IFR. I'm a tower controller. I work in the control tower, and we use visual flight rules as our airplanes do, which means that we look out the window to see the airplanes, as well as the pilots are responsible to look out the window to see other airplanes and the ground as well. Whereas an area controller would use instrument flight rules, and that means they're using, both them and the pilots are using their instruments to guide them through the skies. Someone who works in one of the 7 control centers across Canada as an area controller actually works in like a big gymnasium. There's no windows in there because they have all their screens. So that's just a little introduction to show you what the difference between the two. And all Canadian air traffic controllers are employed by NAV Canada, a not-for-profit organized or corporation that owns and operates Canada's civil air navigation system. So that's who I work for. Next slide, please. So tower controller, why would you want to become a tower controller? Do you prefer things to be constantly changing? Perhaps you catch yourself staring out the window in your class and looking towards the sky at recess. Do you like airplanes? What about shift work? What is shift work? No two days here are the same at my job. There's lots of variables that make our job interesting. So one of the things would be lost pilots. We get some of those, especially since we have a large training school here at my airport. So we have pilots learning how to fly, and sometimes they get a little lost and we help them. The wind determines which runway we're going to use. And as some of you might know, the wind may not be from the one direction all day. So we're constantly changing runways all day. That's a challenge in itself. Sometimes we have the occasional emergency that we're trained to deal with, and everything like that. So thunderstorms, weather, it all makes our day differently. We also have various different aircraft, from helicopters to hot air balloons to fighter jets. As you can see in the picture here, this is WestJet with their frozen paint job. They come into my airport regularly. So that's interesting to watch. And then on the other side is the little flight training aircraft, and one of the beautiful sunsets that I get to see when I'm working night shifts, and also sunrises during the day on a day shift, and thunderstorms too. And there's the background picture more. You can see this is what the cab would look like upstairs. We have our screens, our radar screens. We do have radar screens like the area controllers do, but they're more of a tool for us, where our main job is to look out the window. And a lot of times we use binoculars as well to see aircraft that are further away. And next slide, please. Thank you. So job requirements. What does it take to be an air traffic controller? You have to be 18 years or older, have a high school diploma. It's highly recommended to have post-secondary education, such as a college diploma or a university degree. That just gives you more educational background and helps with your study skills that you would need to become an air traffic controller. You need to be a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, a medical certificate by Transport Canada. All pilots and air traffic controllers in Canada need to hold a medical certificate. And that means you go to a special aviation doctor if you're under 40 once a year, if you're over 40 twice a year. And that ensures that we are healthy while we're in our job, because it is very demanding job, and we're responsible for a lot of things. So they want to make sure that when we come to work, we're healthy. You also need a security check and drug testing before you apply, and be willing to relocate to initial posting. So that means there are 7 area control centers across the country. In Ontario, ours is Toronto. So if you were in Ontario, wanted to become an air traffic controller, you would go to Toronto, apply, write the test, have the interview, and then you would do your training there. After you're successful in your training, you could be sent to any tower in Ontario, excluding Ottawa. Ottawa is part of Montreal's because they're bilingual. So if you do want to work in Quebec, you need to be bilingual in that respect. So they do, however, to get to your initial posting, NAV Canada does pay for you to be posted to your initial one, so all your travel expenses are covered as well. Next slide, please. So training is one of the toughest aspects of an air traffic controller's job. Once you are done training, it's kind of like you can relax and just enjoy the job. Training is quite tough, but it's rewarding once you do get that license. To be successful in the skills assessment that you initially do to get into air traffic controller, and then to get an interview by NAV Canada, some key qualities that they're looking for is sharp judgment, a clear voice, and keen hearing. We use headsets to hear. As you can see in the picture, actually, that I have there of me, we're wearing headsets, just kind of like the headsets that they wear in the McDonald's drive-through. Strong motivation, good memory, and excellent problem-solving skills. So when you go to write the test and have the interview, when you're successful, they then invite you to a class that occurs anywhere between 4 to 6 months, and NAV Canada has its own school, we call it. It used to be in Cornwall, but now it's held at one of the 7 centers again. So for example, in Toronto, you would go to Toronto every day, 5 days a week, just like school, like a university or college, but it's NAV Canada school, and you're learning all the rules of air traffic control. And then once you're successful in that, they send you to your initial posting, which you do on the job training, was what we call it. And so you're sitting with an instructor. So I do that here as well. And basically we teach you how to do the job with live traffic. So you're talking to airplanes from day one once you get to your initial posting. And that on the job training goes for anywhere from 6 to 18 months. So the whole process can last anywhere from up to 2 years. But again, in the end, it's quite rewarding. And you get an air traffic control license. So finally, I'd like to go to my last slide. And just because we're talking about communication today, this is the aviation alphabet, otherwise known as the phonetic alphabet that we use in aviation. And you might have heard it on TV and police shows. Sometimes they will use it as well. And each letter has a different word that is represented by, and the main purpose is to decipher. Say if I were saying M as in Mike, you might not be able to decipher if I'm saying Mike or November, M or N. So that's why we have those words. So I'm just going to go over them quickly with you all. And if you kind of go with me and think about what your name would sound like. So Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, Foxtrot, Golf, Hotel, India, Juliet, Kilo, Lima, Mike, November, Oscar, Papa, Quebec, Romeo, Sierra, Tango, Uniform, Victor, Whiskey, X-Ray, Yankee, and Zulu. So my name would be Alpha, November, Delta, Romeo, Echo, and Alpha. So I can say that because I've been talking like this for over 17 years. It's second nature to me. We use it, say, one of my flight training aircraft that goes by a civil registration here at the airport is GBAQ. So if I need to talk to that airplane, I would call them Golf Bravo Alpha Quebec. Whereas if WestJet flies in, I would identify them as WestJet 123, their flight number. So that's just a little introduction to what a phonetic alphabet in aviation looks like. And that would be one of the very first things that you would need to learn, whether to become an air traffic controller or a pilot or anything in aviation. That's basically the aviation language. So that is my presentation for you all. And I hope it introduced you all to a little bit of what air traffic control is like.
Thanks, Andrea. We'll now hear from our second presenter, Angeline.
Hi, how are you? Now, just want to confirm, can everybody see me? Kaylee, are you able to see me?
Yeah, you look good.
Oh, perfect. That's even better. So my name is Angeline. And if I was to spell that out in phonetic, I'd be Alpha November Golf Echo Lima India November Echo Space Romeo Alpha Mike. And I'm going to be speaking to you about the adventure of aviation. And why I talk about the adventure of aviation is because that's what my career has been. So let me tell you a little bit about myself before I begin. Today I'm speaking to you from Toronto, and this is exactly where I started my career about, now when I think about it, 20 years ago. But the difference is I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I just knew that I wanted to learn stuff and I wanted to have an adventure. And I went off to university. I got my degree in public relations. And I came back and I thought, I just want to do something cool. And I don't know what it is. And so I'm sharing this with you because a lot of the time we don't exactly know what we want to do. But what I can tell you is if you're a person that's looking for an adventure or you're looking for something stable, aviation is a place that has it for you. And so I took a risk one summer when my cousin, who was a baggage handler, said, why don't you apply to a company called Sky Service? And I thought, oh, no, I could never be a flight attendant. You have to be a certain way. And I kept on saying, I can't. And my cousin said, just do it. So I applied and I got the job. And that job then took me out for a lifetime of an adventure. And shortly after working at Sky Service in Toronto, I applied for a job in the Middle East for an airline that hadn't even started yet called Etihad Airways. And I got on a plane in 2003, had no idea where I was going. And I ended up becoming the very first set of cabin crew working for an airline. And I started off as a flight attendant. I then moved up to being an in charge, where you see me in a different uniform in Jordan, buying a bunch of things from the Jordanian market. And then I moved into something called quality assurance, where I was able to write programs. I was also able to go through and check what was happening at different airports. And we had a massive network. And then I moved also into training. And that's where you see me jumping and sliding off of the 777 mock that we have there, and also evacuating people. And so it was quite an interesting experience because I was there for 10 years. And as I started to become better at something, I wanted to do more and I wanted to learn more. And I was given the opportunity, because I took the risk, to start moving around. And so if we go to the next slide, please. 10 years later, I returned back to Canada, and everybody was saying, okay, you need to do something different with your life. And I thought, I need adventure and I need to do something exciting. And so I had an opportunity to work for a company that provided air transportation support for the United Nations based out of the Toronto Island. And while I was there, I was holding a position called the Transport Canada Flight Attendant Manager. And in this role, you're responsible to Transport Canada for all of the cabin crew training, for all of the programs, oversight of the crew, safety investigations, you name it, that's what you're responsible for as it relates to cabin safety. And so during my time there, I had the chance to go out to Monrovia in Liberia, West Africa. And the best part about being in these conflict zones is that you really do get to get your hands dirty. And if you enjoy the adventure like I do, I got to get up on the ladder of a Dash 7 aircraft and clean the windows. I was sitting there cleaning the seats out. Sometimes we would be sitting in scorching hot conditions in the middle of places where we would be dropping off goods and waiting for the diplomats to come back so we can fly them back. In our downtime, we would train the crew. And here's a picture of me on a stretcher where we had to train people what you would have to do in the event of a medical evacuation. And so if soldiers were wounded or if a civilian was wounded, we would need to strap them up and take them back. We would also be shipping cargo. And the best part about aviation is that sense of community. So we would run off to other aircraft who were parked in certain areas, and we would get to know the people. We would get tours of their aircraft. And here we've got like the helicopter that was bringing in massive goods as well as vehicles because they can fit in the back. But it wasn't just West Africa. I ended up living in Afghanistan for 3 months, living in a sea container. I was having to deal with things that were happening in Somalia. And when South Sudan became a new country, we were having to send in supplies as well. We had to safeguard our staff when Ebola broke out. And so there were so many different parts that were involved in this role as being a flight attendant manager. Next slide, please. Now, from that point forward, I had the chance to continue my education. And so I attended a university called Cranfield University, and you'll see a picture of it very soon. And this school is an aeronautical institute in the UK. And so while I was working full-time as a safety manager, and you'll see me sitting there in a private jet, because I was working for a company now that was dealing with private jets and aircraft maintenance. While I was working full-time, I was also going to school. And so what would happen was during the day, I was dealing with safety or whatever else I had to deal with. And then I would take a couple days, like a week or two of a holiday, get on a plane, go to England, sit on a bus for 3 hours, go to sleep, show up, attend class. And I would sit there with people that were VPs from big European industries, like Airbus, you were dealing with Rolls-Royce, all of these entities, and we would sit there living in the dormitory, talking about aviation and learning together. And so it was quite interesting to be able to be working full-time and also learning about things. But you know what? The sense of adventure never left me, because when I sit there and I think about it, you see a little snapshot into what my adventure was when I was living in the Middle East. We would have layovers in the UK where you would go to Stonehenge. You would end up in Pinawala in Colombo, or that was in Sri Lanka, where you would go to the elephant orphanage. You'd end up river rafting in Thailand on bamboo river rafts. Now thinking back, I don't think I would do that again, right? But there was this adventure for people who want to see the world. And that's what aviation gave me. I grew up in North York in a place where my parents didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have access to a lot of things that people had. And the only thing I knew was if I worked hard and I dreamed big, it could happen. And so this is to show you that if you want that sense of adventure, aviation has it for you. So if we go to the next slide, please. So when we think about this idea of aviation, sometimes we think about how it is just within our community. But aviation truly is a global industry. It is so vast. It has so many opportunities. Here's another picture of me in Bangladesh on a river cruise. Okay, maybe not how most of us are accustomed to cruising, but it was an adventure to take that. Below that, you have a team of, there was about 16 of us that were going to Japan that time, right? Where you had this collaborative crew. And my beginning is not where I am now, right? From this point where I started and I entered the world as cabin crew, frontline staff, I then moved up into these various different roles that were associated with oversight, element of quality management. I was writing procedures. And then through my education, where you see me with my group project right there in the middle at Cranfield, from that point, I was able to leverage my way into the safety management world, where, as you can see, we've got our high vis on, where we would go and pick up garbage at the GTAA, which is called FOD, foreign object debris, and we would help to clean the runways. We would also investigate any issues that were challenging people. But the reality is, everything that I have always done has been about community, supporting one another, and helping people see that in aviation, we do things collaboratively to help one another. So now with this, you'll see this picture of me from Sky Service in my red uniform, and you'll see my University of Waterloo ID below it. So in closing, what I'll leave you with is you don't really know where you're going to start. And today I'm back in Toronto, not too far from where I started my adventure in aviation. And from this spot in Toronto, I am now researching how we can create a different environment for the workers and how to create things to support safety reporting. But the irony of it is I'm also able to support companies in Europe as they create their safety systems, as we bring things together by closing that global gap. So the reality is if you're looking for an adventure, or if you're looking to learn and you're not sure what you want to do, this is an industry that can offer it for you. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Angeline. We'll now hear from our final presenter, Jacqueline.
Hi, everyone. Angeline, I wish I could have been a fly on the wall for your life going from shipping containers to private jets. So, hi, everybody. I'm Jackie. I work at Porter Airlines, and my current role is I am a Flight Operations Systems Analyst, and I work in the technology department. So I've been in aviation for almost 12 years now. So I figured I would take you on a little bit of my journey, the different roles I've held, how I got into aviation. So some of these pictures here are some I love. One of them is actually from my old office. I don't have an office anymore. I work from home now, but the other one there means a lot to me with the aircraft and the CN Tower in the background. That was actually Porter suspended service for a little while during the pandemic, and that was our final day on the island prior to that. And then the other pictures are just some of the volunteer work I've done through aviation and women organizations. So we can head to the next slide. So growing up, I wasn't necessarily one of those people who have, aviation in my blood. I know we hear a lot of those stories where people had family members who were in aviation, things like that. I wasn't one of those people. How I got introduced to aviation was actually by, I grew up in Hamilton, Ontario. So going to the Warplane Heritage Museum, it wasn't far from my parents' house, only about a 15-minute drive. So my grandparents used to take us there a lot. These are just some pictures with myself and my brothers. I'm sitting in the captain's seat, of course. I obviously knew that at a young age. So I kind of just got introduced to it there. I was really fascinated by seeing all the different aircraft and the history of them. Each of them had a story, and I thought that was really cool. We didn't fly very often. My first flight was actually as an unaccompanied minor with alongside my older brother there. And we flew to Thunder Bay. We had a lot of family there, but our flight was very much delayed, and we were at Pearson, so a very large airport, and we were kind of just glued to the CSRs there because for hours they just had to entertain us. So they were driving us around on these, carts everywhere through the airport, and I just thought the whole thing was really cool. And finally, when we got on board the aircraft, seeing the crew, and obviously they were giving us special attention because we were unaccompanied minors, but the whole experience was just really fascinating to me. So after that, I didn't fly too often. I still kind of had that thrill of flying. So after my education, I stayed in Hamilton and I went to McMaster. So I ended up getting degrees. One of them was in sociology and one of them was in history. And after that, I just didn't really know what was next for me. At that time, to be honest, I had no idea that, studying aviation was even an option. I just, saw the basic courses and that's what I went for. So when I ended up moving to Toronto, I was, craving something else. I'd stayed at home for university, so wanted to change. And I moved to Toronto in 2009 to do, I went to Humber and I did a postgrad in marketing management. So again, nothing to do with aviation. And once my education was done, I needed a job. And so I just started to applying to anything marketing I could imagine, probably over 50 jobs at that time, and nothing. I didn't get an interview, a call back, nothing. So I used to live across the street from the Island Airport, downtown Toronto, and I used to love watching the planes land. And the couple pictures I have here is actually before I worked in aviation. From the rooftop of my building, we used to be able to see the runway very clearly there, the island, and then the planes landing. And the idea that these planes could land on this small little island in the middle of the lake was just very interesting to me, and I wanted to know more. So I looked up Porter, and then kind of that's where it all began. So we can go to the next slide. So I got hired at Porter in 2010 as a CSR. So that's a customer service representative. So interestingly enough, that's kind of where my interest kind of began, seeing the CSRs when I was younger. And it was a great job. I mean, I loved the culture. I loved kind of how everybody got along and everybody loved what they were doing. So there's a lot of fun parts about being a CSR in aviation. You get to meet some celebrities. One time I got to meet Hugh Jackman, and I actually got to escort him all the way. I checked him in and I got to escort him all the way through security to our lounges. And, you know, when else am I going to get to meet celebrities? I also have my little Stanley Cup picture, which was from my dad mostly. That came through the island as well, so I had to jump on that photo opportunity. So, you know, being a CSR was great, but then I got an opportunity to see SOC at Porter. So that's a System Operations Control Center. So that's kind of what we refer to usually in aviation as the brains of the operation. So they were getting a new, almost like an ATC tower. So I got to go tour that and I was, you know, hooked. I wanted in. So I was getting to know the different roles, and it was actually recommended to me that I look into crew scheduling. So I waited for that job to come up. It came up and I got hired. So I loved being a crew scheduler. I mean, there's really, really hard days, but the camaraderie that kind of exists within SOC is when things are going smooth, they're going smooth, but when they're not, you all have to work together. And I just loved how everybody could come together to just make everything work. So those are those crazy IROP days, we refer to them. So that's an irregular operation. On the island, we can get fogged in and nothing can take off or land. So those aren't our favorite days. A couple of the other pictures here, one's just from the island there at the CN Tower, and the other one is just me sitting in the jump seat, just a view, kind of landing into the island there. Head to the next slide. So it was going well as a crew scheduler. As I mentioned, I did very much enjoy it, but the position for the supervisor of crew scheduling came up, and I was only a couple of years into the job, but I decided to apply and I was successful in getting it. What followed were some very challenging years. It's a very demanding job. You know, I was on call all the time. If my team needed me, I was there. We're a very lean team at Porter still. So there was only 2 of us in leadership. It was myself and my manager. So, you know, we very much had to be there for the team. Aside from just supervising my crew schedulers, you have to be that point of contact for the crew as well. You have to develop those relationships so that they feel confident coming to you if there's a problem. Other things I did in that role, I had to I had to audit their pay. So for all the crew members, I actually ran that payroll. I verified everything and then I sent it to our payroll department. So again, nothing that I ever thought I'd be doing, even in this type of role. Other things I was kind of doing in the meantime, I joined Porter Created Women's Store at Porter. That's a cake picture there we had. So I joined that committee when it started, and it actually opened a lot of doors for me. I got to partake in, you know, different events. That one's from Girls Can Fly. There's other ones called Girls Take Flight. I also got exposed. I got to go to some of the CWA. I got a conference there. I got involved in that community. That's how I started volunteering with them. And I became their program lead for their symposium they just had last year. So while I was doing a lot of these initiatives, it was fantastic. I got a lot of opportunities. I got to travel for conferences. I went to Vegas a couple times, you know, Florida, Portland, Texas a couple times, New Orleans. So a lot of interesting little perks that came with the job that I didn't expect. I got involved with a community called Women of Influence here in Toronto. I volunteered with them for a little while through Porter because I was kind of the liaison between the 2 organizations. So it's just really, I loved seeing everybody, how all the connections kind of come through. So fast forward a little bit, it's now 2020, and we all know what happened. So as of March 20th, 2020, Porter suspended service. So what did that mean for me? What did that mean for my team? Well, we didn't have crew flying. I didn't have pay to submit. I didn't have a team. So, you know, my job was almost redundant. I ended up staying on, and all of a sudden, everything shifted. I had to become almost like a crew systems specialist because we were getting all new software for my department. This when I was doing some of the testing, things like that. I needed to make sure there was new cars. So that's the Canadian aviation regulations. They changed drastically. So we had to make sure all of this now fit into our new software. So all of a sudden I was using technology every day, which I was in the past, but not as the main point of contact. So that's kind of, I wrote here, it just seemed like a breakthrough. I didn't know at the time it was a breakthrough, but where I am now, it's obviously it was. Some of these pictures, again, CN Tower's obviously making a lot of appearances, and then just some of the events I've been to. Come on to the next slide. Okay, so now again, fast forward a little bit, it's getting towards the end of 2021, and Porter was about to resume service. So, you know, my responsibilities, I had to get my team back in gear, and get them back and train them on everything. And while this was happening, something just felt like it was missing for me. You know, I had had this other opportunity. I was working from home before during the pandemic, and I was just using my skills in a very different way than I had been in the past. And so coming back, just something felt like I was ready maybe for a next step. And at this point, I had been in the supervisor role for almost 8 years. So this was a big deal to me. So Porter's actually expanding. We're getting jets. So it's a great time. And I knew that there was going to be a lot of opportunity coming down the line, including opportunities within my own department. So I was kind of faced with this challenge. Do I look for something new? You know, do I stay in aviation? Maybe that's where I need to look at a change. Or do I stay in my role and then, you know, hope for maybe a promotion to come? So I started monitoring the job postings at Porter, and one came up for the analyst role. And honestly, my immediate reaction was, I can't do that. I can't be a technology person. I don't know it enough. That's just not my skill set. So I worked very closely with the individual already who was in the role, and he reached out and he actually was recommending me for the role. And I had no idea. And, you know, he said all the work we've been doing, and he just saw in me that this could be for me. So when I had initially looked at the job posting, things that were sticking out to me was everything I couldn't do. So for an example, one of the job requirements was they needed a bachelor's degree in computer science or engineering or equivalent. Well, none of my education has anything to do with that. So I almost seemed to write it off just based on some of these small things that I haven't been able to do. So when I looked at it again, you know, I said, what can I do? What boxes do I tick here? So these are some of the ones here that it did that were the job related that I know I can do. For example, you know, maintain and support multiple projects. I do that all the time in my supervisor role. Suggest improvements. You know, I've been doing a lot of these things during the pandemic anyway. So the more I thought about it, I said, yes, let me apply. Let's just see how it goes. And we can head to the next slide. So obviously, spoiler alert, I'm here with my new job title. So I got the position. I actually just started in this role at the end of November, so it's still pretty new to me. But I can say with confidence, I've never been so sure of a decision I made. I made the right one because I'm so happy in this new role, and I'm being challenged so much, and I'm learning so much more. So what is a flight operations systems analyst? It's a role that I never would have known about before being in it. So we're kind of the point of contact for all things flight operations, any departments in SOC, all of that technology that's behind the scenes. We need to ensure that we fully understand it, and then we can in turn have the teams have a better understanding of this as well. If they have a problem with something going on with one of their systems, they're going to reach out to us. We're going to look at it. We're going to figure out what's going on. We're going to also look at our existing programs and see how we can make them better. We want our teams, we want this airline to function the best it can. So we need to see, can I improve this process that we're doing? Maybe instead of 10 clicks, I can limit it down to 5, and then I can save everybody some time. To explain a little bit and to try and have people relate, think about when you're at an airport and you see those big screens and you're going to see all of your flight information. Well, that has to come from somewhere. So our systems, and actually the picture at the top there, you can see with all those green lines, that's a flight. So in here is where we control all of the flight information. So if a flight needs to be delayed, the operations teams are going to go in and delay the flight. So if, for example, they can and something's going wrong, they'll reach out to us and we'll investigate what's going on. If they're going to cancel a flight, same thing, it'll happen through here. So this other kind of maze I have going on in this other picture, that's kind of all the behind the scenes of technology at Porter. So we're kind of the hub of everything where all the flight information is, and then it has to be sent to so many different areas. So we have this big domain, it's called our database, and all the information has to feed through there. And in that database, it then goes to all the other systems, whether it's Porter or to maybe another company system. So if something's broken, we kind of need to follow the chain and figure out what's going on. So basically our job is to analyze and then fix people's problems. And we can head to the next slide. So could this be an opportunity for you? Potentially, yes, down the line. I mean, it does come with, you need some experience working with the systems. This wouldn't be a job you could just come right into. So you would need to kind of start with an entry level. But then think about some of the skills that you may have or that you're looking to have. So you're not necessarily born with all of your skills. You can learn them. Without having the crew scheduling background I have, I wouldn't have developed a lot of this skill set. So what are some of those transferable skills? You know, being analytical, problem solver, attention to detail, and so on, kind of on the slide. So you can see it has a common theme, but it also has other things like good communication, organization, because you're talking with a lot of different teams. So there's of course going to be challenges with any job. These are some of the challenges I had to come through. You know, you have to learn different departments. I went from being the expert in crew scheduling and that first point of contact to, you know, being a little bit out of my element. I've never been a dispatcher. I've never been a pilot. I'm not in that aircraft. I can't see what's being communicated to them. So now here I am making flight plans and learning how to do that. In that picture you can see there in the flight deck, there's almost two little screens there. It's a little bit hard to tell, but that's almost a way, well, it is a way essentially for the pilot to communicate to those on the ground. So it's almost like a form of a text message. So let's say, for example, they go to send that message and it's not working. I won't go to the aircraft to take a look. That's the maintenance team. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow up on our systems that we have, and I'm going to see if there's a break in that chain. So maybe their communication coming in worked, but then that, you know, middle ground didn't send it to our other systems. So that's just an example of how kind of everything's connected. You need to work with other teams that may not be your specialty. So maintenance, for example, I've never worked in that area, but they have their own systems that need to kind of be integrated with ours. So we connect with the maintenance tech ops team and we make sure that works. What I love the most about transferring to this role is I have learned so much more about aviation. You know, you think you learn a lot being in the industry, like I said, for almost 12 years now, but now I've seen it from a technology perspective, which not something I thought I would have done, but here we are. And it's just a very different way to kind of look at it. And it's really interesting to see from that perspective. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so kind of the moral of my story, or the moral of my journey. I was in a role that I'd been in for a very long time, and I thought that was my path. I thought my next step was going to be, you know, maybe being promoted within my department. But I had to sit down and think about it. What is actually next for me? Do I need a new challenge, or am I enjoying the current one? And the answer kind of came to it that I need a new one. I had this really interesting sense of guilt. I didn't want to leave, you know, my team members, and I didn't leave them. You know, I still get to work with them all the time, and you can't always think about everybody else. You have to think about yourself sometimes and what's best for you. And the last kind of takeaway I wanted is when everybody, you know, you start getting into the industry, if that's your path, or when you have a job is just a job. You're not there. One time I said to somebody, I feel stuck. You know, I said, I'm stuck in this job. And they said, why? Why are you stuck? And I didn't have an answer because I could apply to any job I wanted, right? It was all in my own head. So get out of your head sometimes. If you think a job is not for you, it might be. Give it a shot. Worst case scenario, you get an interview maybe, and you get some experience. But at the end of the day, don't be scared to take a chance. Don't be scared to kind of push yourself in a direction you've never been. Get out of your comfort zone. And at the end of the day, whatever choice you make will be the right one, because in the moment it was the right choice for you. So just remember that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Now we'll move on to our question and answer period with our moderator, Emily.
Perfect, thank you. I'm just gonna go through our quick chat. I'm also gonna stop our share so we can see everyone's faces. So just going through, the first question is going to be for everybody. So if everyone does want to turn on their cameras, because you can all have a moment to answer this question. So the first question is, are you able to share something interesting about your job that most people might not know? So Angeline, I see you first. So I'll pick on you. Do you want to go first and answer that question? So something interesting.
Thank you very much. What most people don't realize is that safety's super cool, right? Like super, super cool. And what it means is you have access to information that most people will never, ever know. Because when you're trying to understand what's happened and how you can find solutions, you're actually trusted with people's emotions, their feelings, what's happened in the company. And I guess sometimes I think that I get all the gossip, right? Because I know exactly what's going on. But what I'm able to then do is recommend corrective actions or what we can do together to find those solutions. And so that's something that people often don't think about. The second thing, while I'm on my safety so cool thing, is sometimes we forget that safety isn't just putting on a seatbelt or the actions that that we're required to do, but safety is actually part of how we live our life and how we see things. And so those are two big things that most people don't really know of, is that we get access to all this amazing information to create change, but we also encourage the behaviors that create those environments.
Perfect, thank you. I work in safety as well, so I think safety is super cool and will second that opinion. Andrea, would you like to go next and share?
All right. One thing I've been told that is cool about my job is that we can wear slippers at work. I don't think a lot of people will get to say that. I'm dressed for work. I'm here at work, so we dress business casual, I guess you can call it. But especially during the winter, when we don't want to wear our winter boots all shift along anywhere from 8 to 12 hours, a lot of people here have slippers we put on, and so it's kind of like we're at home. We have a kitchen and everything. We cook our meals and stuff. So it's almost like a second home.
That is definitely not something that I knew. I didn't know you had slippers at work. That's super neat, and definitely not something you could do everywhere. Perfect, thank you. And Jackie?
You know, one thing I think that's interesting with aviation is how tight-knit the community is. And Angeline, I think you mentioned something like this, you know, when your aircraft would land, you would speak to other people from different, you know, had another plane there. So for me, when I was in my previous role, I used to go to conferences. I mentioned briefly, but that's kind of the fun part of it. And it was all different. It was North America. So we got to see, you know, communicate with all these different people within the industry, within your department. And we used to call them kind of like our therapy sessions. So it's as small as you might think it is with your specific airline. It's actually smaller than you think, and you're going to get to know people really quickly, and everybody's kind of there for each other. And you know, at these conferences I got to you know, experience seeing speakers from Magic Johnson for some reason, to Captain Sully, you know. So it's a really interesting, I think, industry to come into, that it just might give you little opportunities or perks, if you will, that you never would have thought about.
Perfect. Thank you. And we will move on to our next question. Again, this is for everyone. Is there a skill that you were surprised that you needed to have in your current position or any of your past positions? Jackie, do you want to go first since you just answered?
Sure. Trying to think of one I didn't anticipate. I think a lot of, I'll relate this back to my previous role, actually, because technology, I think there's a lot I'm discovering about myself still. But with my supervisor role and in crew scheduling, you really have to utilize your customer service skills, your communication skills, empathy, things like that, because when you're speaking to crew, there's a lot of them. They're not one personality type. So while, yes, I'm coming in and I'm just doing the scheduling type of thing, you actually need to remember that there's a lot more behind a job than just being at a computer. I was speaking to actual people, you know, and they're coming to you with real problems or really big concerns, and you can't shut it out like it's just a job. So remembering to keep, you know, customer service skills that, you know, I learned in past jobs when I was younger. I didn't think that would be something that I would necessarily need in a job working just in scheduling.
I definitely agree. As a past crew scheduler myself, definitely the customer service aspect of it was not something that I thought I needed. And also the pilots and the crew, like, they are your customers. So really, that was a neat point to see. So perfect, yeah. Thank you. Andrea?
I would say teamwork. I guess you kind of picture air traffic control as an individual person just doing one thing. In our cab here, we usually have two positions open, a tower controller and a ground controller. So the tower controller is talking to the airplanes in the sky, whereas the ground controller is talking to vehicles and airplanes on the ground. And we have to work together to make everything cohesive, get an aircraft across the runway for anything like that. And also not just within ourselves, but us tower controllers talk to the ACC, the IFR controllers as well about those aircraft. So there's other people we're talking to, and we're not just doing the job individually. So that was quite surprising.
Perfect. Thank you. And Angeline?
Great, thank you very much. One of the things we take for granted in the safety world is the importance of being unbiased. And so we tend to live in a world where we have opinions, we think certain things, people tell us things, and we're like, yeah, that's right. But the reality is when you're entering the world of a safety investigation, the first thing is keep quiet, which is always a challenge because I talk a lot, right? So listening to what other people have to say. But the second thing is listening from their perspective, not from what I think because I have an opinion, but actually being fair. And that's a very difficult thing for a lot of people, because when you're starting out, you want to show that you know this, you've researched this, you wrote this paper, look at me, I'm so smart. But the most effective safety people are the ones that remember that the most knowledge that they can gain are from the people who are sharing it with them.
I completely agree. And I think aviation does a really good job in their safety, because a lot of people are very open, and the sharing of safety data now is very commonplace, and safety has improved because of it. So super, thank you. This next question, I think we have 5 minutes left, so we'll quickly go through this one. Is again for everyone. What is the biggest challenge that you have had to overcome in your careers? And Andrea, I think you were the first one who has not responded, or the last one who has not responded first. So would you like to respond first?
The biggest challenge to overcome in my career, that's a tough one. I would say I'm still kind of doing it, and it's the work-life balance. Doing shift work, it can be tiring, especially when you have a family of your own and you have that demand. It's a constant challenge of, you have to apply yourself at work, but you also have to apply yourself at home. So when I get to work, I'm at work. When I get home, I'm at home. And that's almost like a benefit to my job, is that when I do go home, I don't have to bring work with me. So it's that balance, that life balance that I'm still working on.
Perfect. And I do think now for some people that work from home, it's probably a little bit more difficult to even achieve that balance, because you're always technically at work if you're at home. So that is definitely a nice perk of your job. I would agree. Jackie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, actually, Andrea said what I was going to say. The same thing. In my previous role, I had a really hard time with work-life balance, because you have to be available for your team all the time, and I was the only one in the role. So I had a very hard time with that, and just letting go and not being obsessed with monitoring the operation all the time and making sure your team's okay. You have to be able to let go sometimes. And I think the pandemic actually taught me that. If we want to look at some sort of positive from it, I was at home and I started working from home. And like I said, my duties changed a lot. So I really saw a change in myself and how it actually made me better. And when I actually started to make sure I had that proper work-life balance. So I know Andrea already said it, but I think it's really important. And so if something may not be working for you, just, find a change, find a way to make it better, and you won't regret it, because it'll help you immensely.
Perfect. Thank you. And Angeline.
Great, thank you very, very much. So I gave up on work-life balance a long time ago, because I know that I simply don't have that ability. I am quite ambitious and I'm continuously learning. So even if I say I'm going to, put the book away, in the middle of the night, I'm in my bed going, I got to read this, right? So my biggest challenge that I face continuously is that, because I am ambitious and because I am this learner, I'm always doing something new. And the hard part about doing something new is you never feel like you're actually making an improvement, because at that time, you're learning something new and you're struggling through these ideas and you're trying to understand what you have to do. And so what I have to do quite often is I have to step back and look back and say, this is what you've started. This is what you've accomplished. Celebrate it. All right, now let's carry on. And so that's a bit of a challenge for me, because sometimes we don't take the time to recognize our achievements so that we can continue to move forward.
I really like that piece of advice. I have on my fridge a quote, and it says, celebrate simple progress. Because sometimes people don't, you're very focused on long-term goals, and you don't focus on the small wins that you are giving yourself or help achieving every single day. So I like that piece of advice. So I think we have 2 minutes left. I'm going to quickly pass it back to Kaylee to do our closing remarks, and then we will wrap up our session for today.
All right. Well, I'd like to say a big thank you to Andrea, Angeline, and Jackie for taking the time to present at this year's virtual cross-country tour. And also thank you to all of you attendees for being here with us today. These three women provided a peek into the diversity of careers that are available within the aviation industry, and that your first job is only but the start of a lifelong journey of growth. If you have any further questions about what you heard today, please send us an email. The email address is info@elevateaviation.ca. That is info@elevateaviation.ca. And don't forget to visit the Elevate Aviation website for more information on what we do. Thank you from all of us out here in Ontario, and have an amazing day.